Hi there, this is Dylis Guyan from DylisGuyan.com and welcome to our podcast, the Inspired Selling Podcast. And I've got a fantastic guest once again for you today, and that is Steve Hall. So let me just tell you a little bit about Steve. He has been described as Australia's leading authority on selling at sea level, and that isn't an exaggeration. He absolutely is a mine of information, and I'm thrilled to have him here today. And he is the founder and managing director of Executive Sales Coaching Australia and is an executive sales coach and corporate storyteller. And Steve is a really gifted storyteller, not only verbally, but in the written word. I haven't, in fact, seen anybody write as good as Steve Hall. And he helps his clients create a compelling vision that inspires and attracts customers and prospects. He's an author, keynote speaker, and in his words, a devil's advocate, challenging his clients' ideas and approaches to make them more powerful. And he's held senior management positions in sales, marketing, professional services, and project management. And he sold products and services worth more than $100 million in over 30 countries on 6 continents. He's worked with Fortune 500, FTSE 100, ASX 100, and NASDAQ listed corporations, as well as many smaller public and private companies. So I hope I have done you proud there, Steve, in that introduction.
You scared me.
Yeah. Did you not recognize yourself for a moment?
Sounded impressive.
Every word is true. And Steve, you wrote this fantastic article recently called The Terrifying Truth About Your Prospects. And I'd really like to take a deeper dive into that, because it really was a very well-written, spot-on article in terms of the climate of sales, particularly in this, in the 2000s. So can you give us a little bit of context around that? Tell us what you were talking about, and then we can look at the ramifications of the situation that you and I both often find, and then tell us how we can really avoid some of these issues.
Yeah, of course I can. The thing that's scary, the scariest thing about your prospects is that they're just like you, and you and me. I mean, the things that we care about are ourselves. We care about our own customers, our own clients. When we have a sales meeting, we talk about how we can get to customers, what our pipeline's like, how much we're going to sell. When we have an executive meeting, we talk about our products, our customers. We're wired to talk about ourselves, and yet for some reason, when we approach potential customers, when we approach prospects, they think about us, and they don't. They think about themselves, just like we do. And most salespeople, well, that's not fair. A large proportion of salespeople, when they talk to customers, talk about their products, their company, their office, their position in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, whatever it might be, and no one gives a damn. No one cares about you and your products. They care about themselves and their problems, and that's what we should talk about.
Indeed.
So that's the thrust of the article. Is the terrifying truth is that nobody cares about you. They care about themselves. And I don't mean that from a personal perspective. Obviously, we care about our friends, our loved ones. Once you've got a relationship with someone, you care. But if you're a stranger trying to make contact with someone, there's too many other strangers trying to make contact with you for you to care.
So give us some examples of this. Give us some examples of this, then, Steve.
Just imagine for a second that you're a salesperson and you're selling an artificial intelligence product that's got the potential to help your customers to analyze your customers better, analyze your pipeline, analyze your prospects, and to basically sell a lot more. And you want to find customers that have got that problem, that want to sell more, right? So that's the salesperson. Then we take a look at it from the perspective of the person you're selling to. And maybe the person that you want to approach is the managing director or perhaps the sales director of a large company. And from their perspective, they've got, God, how many things going on? they've got their own problems. If their sales are tanking, they've got their board meeting coming up, they've got an annual report to write, their sales director's saying he needs more leads, their marketing director's saying, well, we give you heaps of leads, and the sales director's saying, yeah, but they're crap leads. And the marketing director's saying, your people don't follow them up, and he's going to meditate this. Then your financial controller's saying, well, I don't care who has the leads, but the money's drying up. He's got customers complaining. He's got suppliers that aren't supplying as much as they should. He's got products that are they've got problems with his product. He's got employees to manage. There's a whole heap of stuff he's got to focus on. And at the same time, every week he's getting dozens of sales calls which never get through. He's getting hundreds of sales emails asking for 10 minutes of his time or someone to have a coffee with him. He's got a banked up pile of LinkedIn requests. And he's got, and there are 100 million pieces of marketing content floating in the ether, which he's got no interest in seeing. So the question is, if I'm the salesperson and that's the person I'm trying to get to, how do I break through? How do I get through to get their attention when they've got all this stuff happening? Why should they care about me? And what makes me as a salesperson different from any one of the other 50 or 100 salespeople trying to get through to them? That's the world we live in.
Absolutely. And this is why, of course, we're faced very often with businesses or buyers maintaining the status quo and just staying where they are, not making any changes, even though they want to achieve objectives, and they're not always achieving those objectives because there's so much going on around them. They will just stick with what they've got.
Well, that's right. I mean, the thing is that people need help. And once upon a time, salespeople performed a valuable function. They would give executives information they couldn't get any other way because they knew about their products. There wasn't as many of them, and they could go and see people, and they could provide a scarce resource, information. Well, now we have the opposite problem. There's too much information. I mean, there's gigathings of information on the web, and anyone can get it. How do you tell the fake news from the real news, the fake information from the real information? So salespeople can still perform a valuable function of getting the relevant information to them, but they've got to break through the noise of everyone else that's vying for attention.
Yes, indeed.
And so the questions are, how do I get the attention of these people, of the people I need to get to, when I'm competing with? I'm not just competing with people that sell what I sell. I'm not just competing with people that want to sell anything to that person. I'm competing with their employees, their customers, their own internal people. So how do I get their attention? And when I do get their attention, how do I send them a message that inspires them to at least talk to me? Yes. Because if you can't talk to someone, how can you influence them? How can you inform them and educate them?
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? Is that it's getting that message, getting the relevant message to the right person in terms of, and I love the word that you've used. This podcast is called the Inspired Sales Podcast, and it's exactly the same with your message. It's about that person receiving it and being inspired to then take that next step to say, yes, I need to know more. I would like to see you.
That's right. And then the word you use, step, is a very important one, because a lot of us try to do too much too soon. Mm-hmm. If we happen to communicate with a prospect, a senior prospect, we call them and get lucky and they pick up the phone, or we send them an email. Our instinct is to cram as much as we can and as quickly as possible to try and give them everything we know so that we can persuade them. Mm. But they aren't wired that way. They haven't got the attention span. Well, it's not they haven't got the attention span. They haven't got the reason to pay attention. Yeah. So what we need to do is do a step-by-step process. And the first step is to get their attention, nothing else. Yeah. And once you've done that, then that gives you a little bit of luxury for the second step, which is to tell them how you can help them. And then a meeting, and then you gradually build up. I think of it a little bit like, I'm not a sailor, but I know if you're in a boat and you want to throw a line to another boat, these big ropes that you've got on a yacht, they're far too heavy to throw. So what you have need is a bit of string with a stone on it that you throw across, and then they pull the string and they get a bit of rope and they pull that, and then the hawser comes in. Yes. So you need small steps. Get their attention, get their interest, get a meeting, and then you've got the leisure to ask the questions, do the challenger selling or the spin selling or whatever it is you do to really understand their situation. And
Yes.
even then, even when you get the meeting, there's a lot of, there was a study I saw from, I think, Forrester in 2014 that said senior executives are only happy with about one sales meeting in 5, and that 4 out of 5 are a failure from the senior executives perspective. So when we have that first meeting, we need to know what we're trying to achieve and know what they want. We're trying to add value. We're trying to show we're credible, and we're trying to understand their situation, certainly, but we also need to give them some insights that can help them. Yes. So it's not as if the first meeting is the end meeting. It's still a step in the process.
And the research, the research, of course, is so important, isn't it, to ensure that your message is relevant?
Well, it's very important. I mean, assuming you can get in front of a senior executive in a target account, what do? I mean, gone are the days when you could say, tell me about your business, or what keeps you awake at night. I mean, those questions basically say, I haven't done my research, I know nothing about you. And if I'm a senior executive and someone that says that to me, I say, well, why should I tell you that? There's 1,000 sellers out there that want to know about my business and what keeps me awake at night. What can you give me? So you've got to be able to go in there and say, sure, I've got to ask questions, because asking questions is the way that you engage people. It's the way you steer a conversation. It's the way you inform and change people's minds. But they've got to be questions that give something. They've got to show that you're credible. They've got to show that you've done research and you understand a reasonable amount about their company and a lot about the problem you can solve. Because it all comes down to either solving a problem or helping them with an opportunity. And if you don't know the details and the ramifications and the effects and the impacts of the problems that you solve, if you don't know the nitty-gritty of not of your software or your hardware, whatever you're selling, but of the business problem you're solving, then you can't add value.
Yes,
and that's what you're going to do. So when you get in front of someone, you've got to be able to ask what I call intelligent questions.
And thought out questions. Be prepared before you go to your meeting with your questions.
Absolutely.
From the research that you've done and your understanding of the client and the world in which they operate and their customer base and their competitors.
That's absolutely right. I mean, look, let me give you an example. I used to sell ERP systems to publishers, and I knew publishing pretty well by the time I'd been involved for a couple of years. And one of the things in publishing that's a really big deal is returns, because books are normally sold on sale or return. And so publishers actually have to manage the returns from the bookshops. They have to give credits. They have to reconcile everything. It's a real pain in the backside for them. I mean, it would cost them a lot of money, but they have to do it because that's how they get the books out there. Now, I do know of a company that went into a publisher and said, tell us how your returns work. And I suppose that's better than do returns, but it's still pretty bad.
Yeah. Right?
I used to go in and I just say, okay, well, look, I know returns is a big issue. So tell me, for your trade books, I guess your returns are what, between 18 and 22%? And they'd say yes. I said, in academic books, your returns would probably be more like 12 to 15%. Is that right? And then I said, and you've obviously got a returns window and you've got conditions about how many books they can return. But do you have a situation where this bookseller will send you a remittance advice where there's, 50 invoices they're paying, but then there's 30 claims for returns, and they end up, the remittance advice is for $80,000 worth of invoices or pounds worth of invoices. But after all, the claims are giving you a check for £40,000, and you've got to reconcile it all. Then you've got to bring the books back. Then you've got to match it. Do you have that problem? And they'll say, well, yeah, we do. And I say, well, isn't that annoying? And do you have the situation where the books they send back aren't even yours and they sit in the warehouse? And by asking those questions, you're getting the information you need, but you're also showing you live in their world. Yes. You know their problems, and you can solve their problems. They're what I call intelligent questions. Yes. And you need to know the business that you're working in, the problems that you're solving, and the impact of the problems that you're solving. And you don't even need to fix that.
Yeah. So if we take this back a step then, John, to because we know how absolutely critically important the research is for your meeting, but let's go back a step to the research to enable you to be able to craft those relevant messages when you are prospecting, when you're first making that contact.
Well, you need different messages, pardon me, different messages for different stages. Your first message has only got one objective and nothing else. And that objective is to get a meeting. What I just said about returns, you can't do that in a phone call because it's only a tiny aspect of the big picture. That's when you've got the face-to-face meeting. When you're trying to craft a message to get yourself a meeting, it has to be short, it has to be easy to understand, it has to be difficult to misinterpret, because we all misinterpret things really easily, you know. And just to give you an example, if I call and get an executive assistant, and I want her to pass a message on to him or her, I'm being sexist, I apologize. If I want him or her to pass on a message to the CEO, who happens to be a woman, then,
yeah, get the levelers in, John.
then that message has to be easy for her to understand and easy for her to pass on. Because if I say, oh, well, look, I'd like to talk to him about how we use the cloud and the internet to do this, that, and the other, they're going to say, oh, some guy called about the internet. And he's going to say, oh, well, call IT. So it needs to be short, it needs to be easy to understand. And it needs to be about them. You know, if you're talking about yourself, you've lost. I can give you some good examples. We had a digital agency come to us. This is 6-7 years ago. And they said, look, we're really good at talking to CEOs when we get to meet them, which wasn't true, by the way. But how do we get to meet them? And I said, okay, good, we can help you. Tell me, what's your target market? And they said, well, we can help anyone. I said, well, that's great, but let's pick someone, because that's the first thing. You need to target a relatively small, if you're doing some focused work to try and get meetings with senior executives, you can't do it for 1,000 people. You've got to do it for a small group. So let's do it for a small group where there's a common message. So I said, okay, let's pick one. So we said, okay, well, we know retailers are good. We've got some experience in retailers. I said, okay, great. What do you do for them? Oh, we can do anything. Said, okay, well, that's not terribly helpful. Okay, what problem do retailers have that's a really big issue for them that you can help them with? So we did some research, and back then in Australia, there was a lot of publicity about GST, which is our form of VAT, on imports, because that's not charged imports less than $1,000. So all the retailers were complaining that, oh, the online retailers have got this big advantage, we're having to compete. And the huge issue in Australia was competing with online retailers. So we said, okay, well, we'll create a very, very simple value proposition. And we called, I think it was 100 retailers in Australia. And we said, we want to talk to you for half an hour about helping you compete with online retailers. Really simple message. Yeah. And I think we got them about 35 meetings at senior executive level, just by talking about what retailers really cared about at that moment. So your message has got to be about the person you're speaking to. It's got to be as personalized as it possibly can. It's got to be short and simple, and you've got to find a way to get it to them, because one of the big challenges at the moment is, how do you get the message to them? Everyone's got voicemail. Everyone's got executive assistants that tries to stop you, or that we think tries to stop you, or in real life they can be your greatest ally. How do we get the message to them? And there are different ways, and you use the ones you have to use. The best possible way to get a meeting with someone is A, have the right message, but B, you get it there through a referral, if you can organise a referral. Yeah. And people tend to think of referrals in the car sales sense. Oh, I've just sold you a car. Who else do you know that needs a car? But in B2B, it's not like that. In B2B, you target who you want to get to first. In this company, who are the people I want to speak to? And okay, I'm going to get a referral. Who do I know that knows them, and that's also willing to give me a referral, and that's also credible enough for the referral to make a difference? And LinkedIn's a fabulous help with that. But the big challenge with LinkedIn, as you and I know, is that it's fabulous for researching target prospects. It's fabulous for seeing who knows who. But if you research them, they're going to research you too. Yes. Yeah. So if your profile is all over the place, or says, I'm a wonderful salesman, I screw my prospects and crush my quota, it doesn't look that good when they research you. Yes. So if you're going to go on.
Now, I was just going to say how important having a good profile on LinkedIn, not a CV.
No.
A profile that, again, lights the fire of the reader, that inspires them because you're talking about them and the problems that you can solve, and then having some credibility in there in terms of your expertise. But that's the smaller part. It's client focused.
It's got to talk to the people that you're selling to or that you're focused. If you're a salesperson, it's got to talk to your potential customer, and it's got to be credible. I mean, you mentioned the word consistency, and I'm sure you've read Robert Cialdini's book Influence, and his second one Prefluence, which are both brilliant. And one of the things that people really value is consistency. And if you call someone that says, "Oh, look, I can help you with your problem in X, Y, Z," and then your profile says something totally different, there's that lack of consistency, and it jars.
Yes.
So you need to get your ducks in line. You need to be consistent in how you get the message to them, what the message says, what you say online and via your profile. And one of the things that gets the meetings is just constant repetition of a very simple message via multiple channels. I mean, there's a methodology that we use that uses a combination of voicemail, of email, of conversations with executive assistants, of conversations with the person you're trying to get to, perhaps LinkedIn emails, perhaps alternative methods to get messages to people. But the trick is a simple, easy to understand message that doesn't tell too much. You only want to tell people enough to get the meeting, nothing more.
And you've got a great example in your article in The Terrifying Truth About Your Prospects. You've got a great example of that in there. Could you share that with us, John?
If you can remind me what it is, because I read it a while ago.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I'll put you on the spot there. It was about, rather than saying, we'll use artificial intelligence and a database, it's really talking about the outcome, the problem that you'll solve.
Well, you've got to talk about the results they get, not how you do it. You talk about what you can do for them, not how you do it. Because the second you start talking about artificial intelligence or the internet, people live in the status quo. It's really easy to do nothing. Your biggest competitors do nothing. So the natural instinct of someone when they get a message, whether it be via an email or via a telephone conversation, is to find a way to get rid of you. And saying we already do that, or we've got one of those, is a really easy way to do that. You only need to give people enough information to make them curious and to think, we've got that problem. Maybe I should speak to this person because maybe they can help me. But if you give them too much information, it's such an easy jump for them to misinterpret it and think, no, we already do that, and get you to go away. So I can't think of the particular example you're thinking of, but I can give you an example from when we did a campaign for one of the 3 largest software companies in the world who wanted to get into credit unions and second-tier banks here. And the message we used was really simple. It was, we want to talk to you to help you sign more home loans. Because that was a big issue for them. We didn't say how we did it. We didn't say it was about customer experience, which it was. We didn't talk about technology. It was simply, I want to talk to you because we can help you sign more home loans.
Yes.
And that gives them enough to know, to think, well, we want to do that, so maybe we should talk to these people. But if we'd said, improving customer experience, they say, oh, well, speak to the customer experience officer, or we've already got a project in that. So just enough and no more is the trick at that stage.
Yeah.
Now, once you get in front of them, it's a totally different story.
Yeah. And I remember a number of years ago, I was wanting to get into a particular pharmaceutical company, and I used Google Alerts. So that's google.com/alerts.
Yeah.
And you put the name of the company or individuals in there. Anyway, I put the name of the company in, and a few months later, I got an alert telling me that they'd issued their financial report. And when I had a look in there, the chairman in the executive summary was talking about how they had increased the sales year on year, which was a really significant amount, but they were being negatively affected to the tune of 5% on currency fluctuation. Now, I couldn't prevent the currency fluctuation, but I could increase the sales revenue to mitigate that 5%. And so I actually cut and pasted that paragraph that the chairman had written and put that into an email. It was only a short paragraph, and I'd sent it to the decision maker. Dear Mark, I noticed from your financial report that your chairman said, I work with pharmaceutical companies just like yours, helping them to increase sales to mitigate currency fluctuation. Now, there's products now that can do that, but then there wasn't, or certainly I wasn't aware of them at that time. And I got a meeting, I got a response to that morning. So I said first thing, I got it before lunch, because it was very relevant, it was very specific, it was top of mind for them. And so I wasn't telling them how to do it, I was just telling them that I could do. I wasn't giving them the detail of how I would do it. I was just telling them what I could do for them.
Well, you achieved your first objective, which was the meeting.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, you need to do as little as possible to achieve the meeting.
Yeah. And I bang on about this all of the time. You know, your prospecting is nothing more than to get a meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a client in the States recently, and they sold to hospitals. And what we've done, why am I telling this story? Oh, that's right, yeah. And I was advising them, among other things, on emails they were sending to CEOs. And and I was saying, look, you've got to talk to them about their issues and etc. And this sales guy, he was a nice guy, experienced, but he sent me an email to have a look at. And it was 6 paragraphs, and 5 of the paragraphs started with the name of the product. And I said, look, they don't know the name of your product. They don't care about your product. They have never heard of it, and they never care if they do hear about it. The only thing they care about is the fact that they are losing revenue because they've got massive patient debts. Only talk about that. And they said, but shouldn't we do the branding? Shouldn't we getting our name out there? I said, no, branding's for Coca-Cola. Branding's when you've got $1 billion to spend on advertising. When you're talking one-on-one, you talk about to an individual about what they care about. And what they care about is themselves and their problems and nothing else, which is why we started this conversation.
Absolutely, yes. So the 3 key things really then is getting the right message out, which is relevant to the right person in the right way. And really we've talked about multiple contacts. And really, if we break this down even further, Steve, what we're saying is that the letter, the email, the voicemail, whatever, is to get on the phone with someone to then make an appointment. That's
right. And that initial appointment can be on the phone. I mean, a lot of my clients have their first meeting on the phone, and there's there's advantages and disadvantages. I mean, Australia, we actually have quite concentrated markets. I mean, if you're working in Sydney, it's quite easy to get to a client.
Yes.
But from a perspective of a potential customer, it's actually an easy decision for them to make to speak to you on the phone and to see you face to face, because that takes less of their time. It's less of a commitment. They can put the phone down if they're not interested. And from my perspective, I can do 2, 3, 4, 5 calls on the phone in a day. That compared to one maybe 2 if I'm driving out there. So there are pros and cons of doing it face to face or doing it over the phone. In England, I mean, I know England's a small country, but getting around's a pain in the backside.
Yeah.
So if you're in Oxford, doing a meeting in London is your entire day.
I was in London yesterday, and it took me 3 hours from leaving the client to getting back home through my door.
What's that? 60 miles?
Not even that. Yeah, about 60 miles. Yeah. It was hideous. But yes, and of course with the technologies that we've got now. I mean, look at this. Our listeners and viewers will be thinking that we're neighbours here, but in fact you're in Australia. I'm speaking to you right now, and you're sat in Australia, and I'm sat in UK. So the technologies are fantastic now in helping us and aiding us to be able to communicate with clients.
And not only this, but if we do a meeting the way we're doing it, we can record it, and then we can look at what we did right, what we did wrong. We can remember what people said, etc., etc. And I think we're probably coming to the close, but there's one thing that I do after an initial meeting, which I find very, very useful. If it's face to face, or if it's online like this, we can record it. But if it's face to face, The only things that I take in, three things. I take my brain, hopefully. I take a pen and I take a pad. Never put my phone off. Never take a laptop because there's a temptation to use it and you look a bit like a traveling salesman. And if you write notes, A, it makes you think and listen, and B, it helps you to remember, and C, it shows that you're taking an interest. And at the end of the meeting, I'll go back, I write up the meeting, and I write down what we said, what we agreed, and I'll send it back to the client. I'll say to the prospect, and I'll say, look, this is what I think we said. This is what I think we agreed. But can you please just check this out and make sure I've got it all right and understood it fully, and make sure I haven't missed anything.
I love that, John. I love that.
Yeah, what that does, that reinforces it in their mind. It shows that you listened and really wanted to understand, and it's another reason to continue the dialogue and to build a relationship.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that's a useful tip, I think.
Brilliant. And I really would encourage people to read the article, The Terrifying Truth About Your Prospects, which you can find on your LinkedIn profile at Steve Hall on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's actually Steve Hall, Sydney.
Steve Hall, Sydney. Brilliant. Yeah. And I do encourage people to have a look at that. And also, if anyone wants to get in touch with you to talk further or to engage your services, then they can do that through LinkedIn too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Would you like to give out an email, or would you rather just communicate through LinkedIn?
No, well, my email's on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to communicate through LinkedIn. But it's steve@executivesalescoaching.com.au.
Brilliant. Steve, thank you so much. I've loved every moment of talking to you, and I hope you'll come back as a guest another time.
Be very happy to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. Speak to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.